every child with an autism diagnosis should have a developmental vision exam. You don't even need to see the symptoms because sometimes you can't see them, and kids learn how to compensate. And you don't know what you don't know. And I once saw a child and I said to him, do you ever see two of something? He was like 12 or 14. I said, do you ever have double vision? Oh, he said, all the time. I can see two heads. You have two heads. His mother nearly jumped out of her chair. And she said, you never told me that. And he said, Mom, you never asked. So when you say in English, someone has vision, Steve Jobs had vision, and Barack Obama had a vision. People think about vision as something that happens in your mind and in your mind's eye. And a vision is not the prescription in your glasses. So in English, we use vision and eyesight synonymously, but they're different. The eyesight that we have is just the clarity of what we see. The vision is what we do with what we see. It is giving meaning to what we see. So when someone looks at you, when a baby looks at the face and smiles, that is recognition. That is something that goes way beyond just seeing it clearly. When we look at our watch and we say, I'm late, you have done a whole lot of thinking and turning the big hand on the 5 and the little hand on the 12 into a concept. And so that's the first thing that I want your listeners to understand, that when I use the word vision, I'm talking about the interaction between the eyes and the brain. That is conceptual, organizational, imagination. And this is what many people with autism lack. Now, how do you get vision in the first place is through body and space experiences. It's when we move through space. Again, an area that people with autism don't like very much often. They have trouble with their coordination. Sometimes they walk late. Sometimes they have eye-hand coordination. And again, it's not an eyesight problem. It could be that they're a little bit nearsighted or a little bit farsighted. But often it is more of a binocular problem, that their two eyes may not be sending the brain the same message simultaneously. So if the eyes aren't working together, the brain is getting this kind of information and it's like, yikes, what do I do with that?
Yeah, very confusing if that were to be going on. And what an aha for some of us that are just, really putting that together.
And if you're looking at me, I can't tell by looking at you whether your brain is getting simultaneous information from your two eyes.
Right.
It takes an important specialized vision exam that goes beyond that eyesight at 20 feet. Does he have 20/20? Most of our kids do have 20/20. They can see that chart. Sometimes they have a little blurriness at near point, like those of us who are over 40, and they need maybe some magnification. But sometimes it's often that they don't have good binocularity, or they may not have good visual flexibility. So every 8 inches in space requires them to refocus and refocus and refocus from the book to the teacher to the blackboard, social distance, computer distance. Those are all different distances. And a good, efficient visual system learns how to do that from experience. And learning is a key word there, because we learn how to use our vision in a predictable, systematic, developmental fashion. So we know how babies use their vision for recognition, and we know how kindergartners use their vision, and how adults who are well organized use their vision efficiently. So when we look at someone with autism, we see symptoms that they're not efficient. And that may be just the lack of eye contact. And traditionally, the lack of eye contact is interpreted as a psychological thing. Oh, he doesn't like me, or it's too frustrating or anxiety producing to look at me. But that's not the case. It may be that he sees two of you. He may be having double vision, or your head may be going around in circles. And if that's the case, not looking at you and listening to you is easier than dealing with the symptom of double vision or inefficient vision. Yeah. So that we have to think about, what are those symptoms? A child that stims may be trying to jumpstart an eye that's not working with the other eye. And sometimes it can be very obvious. You may see an eye turn. You may see crossed eyes, both eyes turning, or one eye turning when the child's tired. It may turn in or out, or up or down, and that's called a strabismus. And sometimes an eye doctor, an ophthalmologist, may recommend surgery for a strabismus to straighten the eye. He interprets it as a muscle problem. And often these surgeries are not successful because it isn't a muscle problem. Yeah. It's a brain-eye coordination problem. Mm-hmm. And so even if the eye becomes cosmetically straight, the brain again may not be receiving the information in a coherent fashion. So we have to help that child learn how to do that. So the first thing we need to do is find the right kind of eye doctor who can do a complete eye exam of vision and not just eyesight. And that eye doctor is often an optometrist, not an ophthalmologist who's an MD and learns about pathology, but an optometrist is like a PhD in eyes. He is also an eye doctor. He's an OD, a doctor of optometry. And he went to 4 years of she went to 4 years of graduate school just working on the eyes and vision. And then some optometrists go further and do postgraduate training and become a specialized kind of optometrist called a developmental or behavioral optometrist. And your listeners can go to a website called COVD, College of Optometrists and Vision Development, COV like Victor, D like dog, COVD.org, and put in your address and they'll find you someone locally.
Okay, I'm really interested in checking out who you found for my son Joseph, although he's 28.
Never too late, Bridget. That's never too late. Because especially with high functioning adults like your son, who our goal is to work independently, this just makes them a better version of who they are. They have what might be holding them back are visual inefficiencies. And we can help them because they can state to us, I have a goal. I want to hold a full-time job. I want to learn how to drive. I want to live independently. I want to get married and have a baby. You know, all of these things. You say, well, what does that have to do with vision? Remember, vision, you want to see it in your mind's eye. You want to visualize it, plan it, organize it, conceptualize it before it happens. And many of these optometrists work with high functioning athletes to do just that. That baseball player puts, I am going to hit a home run in his mind's eye before that ball hits the bat. That tennis player puts, I am going to serve an ace before he actually hits the ball. So when these optometrists have their practice, an office might have people with autism at all different levels, as well as high functioning athletes in the office learning how to use their vision efficiently.
I just think this is so fascinating. Just what I've read and listening to you, I am so excited. And here I am 28 years later, because I believe that this is a missing link for my son.
It's a missing link for so many kids and adults. And it's just, I didn't learn about vision. Remember, in the late 60s, I was doing play therapy and trying to help kids. I didn't learn about this till 20 years later. Not till the mid-late 80s did I meet my first optometrist, who, when he did a vision exam on me, it was so different from any other eye test I'd ever had. And when he showed me vision therapy, that I could learn how to use my eyes, and how he used all kinds of apparatus to get my body moving in space and to get my eyes working together, it was just fascinating to me. So I've become a very good friend of optometry and have worked as a bridge between the public in the disability world and optometry, in both teaching the public about the power of vision and vision therapy, and teaching optometrists how to talk to schools about learning disabilities, kids who have reading problems, who skip lines, kids who make, quote, careless mistakes. All of these are possibly underlying vision problems. And the optometrists weren't very observant, and pardon the pun, when the law was being written. And so vision therapy is not a related service in the public schools, unfortunately, like occupational therapy and speech and language therapy. So we have to figure out how to get the schools to understand the power of vision and what vision therapy can do in the long run to save the schools money and save the schools time and save kids a lot of frustration.
Yeah, because I was a teacher. I was in the school system for 20 something years. And I can tell you that I'm an educator and have not
been never heard of this
at the level, the deepness of this topic. And, like most of us, when I get passionate about something, look out, because I think back on, Joseph pointing out of the corner of his eyes because of all the things that you're saying. And I'm just thinking, okay, so vision equals then, well, is it really a motor skill issue? Or is it coming from the vision and the way the brain and the eyes are working or not working together?
So there's, you had the symptom, It was right there, him looking out of the corner of his eye, but nobody said to you, Bridget, get this kid the right kind of eye exam. And maybe you did go to an ophthalmologist who said, look, he's 20/20, he doesn't need glasses.
Exactly.
That's only a piece of the puzzle.
Right. All I knew was, and all the information when asking that is, well, it's easier for him to pay attention using his peripheral vision versus looking at you. And so I thought, well, then, I'll just make sure his teachers know that. We'll just move on. I was like, oh.
So some kids with autism are more peripheral, and some kids with autism are more focal or look right here. And you can tell by their behavior. Those kids who are more right here are those kids who can find the dust in the carpet and who are very limited in their visual flexibility. And one of the things I say in my book is that inflexible behavior is a sign, a symptom of inflexible vision.
Yeah.
And as we loosen up the vision, we loosen up the behavior. And there are a couple books written now on visual issues in autism. And I give you those titles in my book. And there are all kinds of optometrists out there doing this vision therapy. Not all of them work with people with autism. Mm-hmm. So you have to not only find one who's trained, you've got to find one who's trained and familiar with autism, because, some of those kids are hard to work with.
Yeah, that is true. So how would parents know if that is true of their child? So, we're talking about symptoms, many individuals with autism.
Right. Every child with an autism diagnosis should have a developmental vision exam. You don't even need to see the symptoms, because sometimes you can't see them, and kids learn how to compensate, and you don't know what you don't know. And I once saw a child, and I said to him, do you ever see two of something? He was like 12 or 14. I said, do you ever have double vision? Oh, he said, all the time. I can see two heads. You have two heads. His mother nearly jumped out of her chair. And she said, you never told me that. And he said, Mom, you never asked.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine.
I know.
Yeah.
And he's trying to control that all the time. So you go to the website and you find an optometrist. Some of them have 5 letters after their name. They have F, like for fellow, COVD. Those are more highly trained people. Mm-hmm. So if you have a choice between someone who has an FCOVD and someone who does not, I would go with the more highly trained one. Now, it takes a long time to get trained, and there's some good optometrists out there who are not fellows. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to touch on one other organization. There's an organization called the Optometric Extension Program, OEP. And OEP has many pamphlets for educators. You said, nobody told me. So they have something called an educator's guide. They have a pamphlet called Vision in the Classroom. They publish a pamphlet that I wrote called Attention Deficits, a Developmental Approach, and looking at all the symptoms from the DSM-5 of attention problems and saying, these could be vision issues. These could be sensory integration issues. These could be nutritional issues. So you have to look at all 3 areas, as you do with autism, in attention deficit. What is the child eating, drinking, breathing? Is he living on gluten and dairy products to which his body is having a reaction? And the eye is the nutritionally most demanding organ of the body. It is eye doctors, you say, You shared with me something that you have as a health issue. That health issue is often picked up first by an eye doctor because they see changes in the eye. And the eye doctors see that and refer you to someone who is a nutritional expert. So we see this often with kids who have nutritional deficits. And any of the kids with sensory integration problems, because the lower level senses like touch and movement and the vestibular system happen earlier, they lay the foundation for vision. And so if you're seeing an OT, we need to educate the OTs about vision. Now, some OTs have educated themselves about vision, and they're crossing over a line and doing vision therapy when they should not be doing vision therapy. They should be working collaboratively with an optometrist who can guide them on how to do vision activities.
If we look at breaking it down, what can be done to help those with autism learn how to use their vision more efficiently? So we have steps in place. What are some things that we can do to help our kids?
Well, the first thing is you want to make sure that they have any acuity problems, any eyesight problems are corrected. Okay. Some of our kids with autism are farsighted. They can see that chart 20 feet, but it's blurry at near. And we don't think about that typically with young kids. Optometrists also use prism lenses to help ground kids with autism. So their use of lenses can be therapeutic as well as used like mine are for distance as crutches. So we want them to use these lenses to kind of give the brain a jump start on what life might be like if their eyes worked together. And those are temporary lenses. There's another pamphlet that OEP publishes called Learning Lenses. And that explains how those are used to help the eyes work together. But that is done under the auspices of an optometrist. Now, we can help kids by giving them compensatory techniques, like this online learning that's taking place now is very stressful for so many kids, especially those with vision problems, because the computer distance is a different distance than seeing the blackboard or a social distance. And we're making them spend many hours a day at this computer distance. So we want to give them vision breaks. Every 45 minutes to an hour, we want to let them walk around and do some big motor activity like climbing or bike riding or something like that. We also might want to transfer what's on the computer to a piece of paper. So the math that's on the computer might be hard for someone to focus on. And if you put it on a paper that has grid lines on it, like a piece of graph paper, it keeps the columns lined up. And you can blow it up and make it bigger so that it's easier for them to focus on. Three-dimensional learning is so different than two-dimensional learning. And that's the way the body works and the mind and the eye. When you put your hand in your pocket and you're looking for a coin, your fingers by touch can tell the difference between a quarter and a penny, just by size. Yep. And so that developed from your experiences as a young child. And that combines touch and vision, because you could visualize that coin without seeing it.
Yes, and I think the the comprehension of the learning. I mean, you're going to remember things if you can touch them, right?
You
So
are.
that kinesthetic piece of
The
learning
kinesthetic learning, right.
that puts it all together.
There's a great book. It's called Thinking Goes to School. It was written in the 70s and it has become a classic. And it's written by Harry Wachs, Wachs. He was a pioneer optometrist. And the book is still available. It's on Amazon. Thinking Goes to School. And his co-author is Hans Furth, Furth. And Hans Furth is a Piagetian expert, a Swiss psychologist. And in my book, I talk about the Piagetian steps of child development and how they relate to vision.
I would say developmental optometry kind of found me when I had vision problems starting in second grade is when I first got glasses. And struggled to read, struggled with learning, was always a very determined person who managed somehow to make the grade without necessarily doing things the way my classmates or my sister did. And then, I worked really hard through elementary school, high school, was always on high honor roll, but again, did things my own way. When I got to optometry school, I was having headaches every day. And I could choose whether to look at the board far away or the slides that were presented or look at my notes. I couldn't make switches back and forth, or I would have a headache that would last, the rest of the afternoon, making it difficult to study. And I was a student at the Pennsylvania College of Optometry, and I went to the Eye Institute for my eye exam, my first year of optometry school. And the fourth year student who was doing my exam, kind of nervous because I couldn't provide the same data for the testing that was being done like repeatedly. So I was diagnosed with a vision problem with focusing and two-eye coordination, that I was recommended to have vision therapy. And prior to that, I had never heard of vision therapy, had nobody had ever said I could do anything about the way that my eyes worked. I was in optometry school because I had glasses and contacts, and I knew my optometrist really well and thought it was a good career path. And then I needed vision therapy, and it completely changed the trajectory of my education and my career. Yeah, my personal experience with having a vision problem, I think, has allowed me to interpret some of the symptoms that my patients describe, because I understand what it feels like and how difficult it is to put into words what it's like to have a vision problem, to feel what it's like to, not have consistent access to clear, comfortable, single vision. It's not something that the majority of people ever experience.
Yeah, so you have a connection a deep connection with your patients that you wouldn't otherwise have, because you have that level of empathy. Look, I know. So how has your practice evolved to include work with infants and special needs children? So you just told us your background and your why, and so how does that work?
So along the way, I became very interested in movement and yoga and my own practice of, becoming a student of yoga and movement. I really saw the changes in my own vision as I was going through vision therapy, as well as practicing a lot of yoga and movement, and brought me to question, like, how does the organization and movements of the body impact the visual system? So when I was a resident at SUNY State College of Optometry in New York, I questioned, like, if we do body movement exercises that are, based in reflexes and early movement patterns, can that change how the visual system works? So I did all my research that year in that vein, and came up with a lot of information about the gestational period, like when a baby is inside the mom, like what matters as far as experiences, and then the birth process and the early infancy time as being really impactful for development of the foundations of visual development. So that kind of started things off, for me. And then I had my own children and used the things I had learned academically to make some decisions for myself around my birth plan and how I chose to have my own children and treat their early infancy time. So that has, again, brought my personal experience into my professional life, where because I did it myself and for my own children, I've really seen the impacts that those decisions have had. And I try to share what my experiences are with other people. I was fortunate enough to meet Patricia Lemer of the Developmental Delay Resources early in my career. And she really helped me to see some of the pieces of the puzzle for development that then allowed me to make some of those decisions for myself with confidence around my preparation for pregnancy, my birth, and then that early infancy time. She introduced me to the idea that every person is born with what she calls like a bucket. There's a certain amount of toxin and experience and trauma and stress that a person can handle before that bucket begins to overflow. And so when we experience that overflow is when we start to see symptoms of dysfunction in our nervous system and our digestive system and all our skin and, all different parts of the body. So I had known those things prior to having my own children. So I really was trying to keep their bucket as empty as possible.
When you're working with the special needs population, and we have it's like a maze, right? Which direction do we go? Where do we start? How do we navigate it? How do you help families do that?
What I really start with is kind of a philosophical conversation of not getting stuck and taking a step back to really think about where we've been, where we are, and where we need to get to, and to recognize that there is a flow and a kind of interconnectedness of a variety of different things that need to come together in order to get us forward to a place that is different. And that really, it takes a very broad holistic approach. We're not going to, take one little thing and do that and have it shift everything else most of the time. Sometimes we're lucky enough to find a little bit of a key that opens things up, but most of the time it's putting a lot of different pieces together that over time just allow us to shift. And trying really hard to just never get stuck in thinking that nothing's ever going to change. There's no power that I have to make a shift or change. A lot of the people that I see, I feel like haven't been given the permission to shift for themselves what it means for them, their children, their entire family unit to be empowered, successful, healthy people. And they're looking for other people to tell them exactly what needs to be done every step of the way. So I really do try to look at each case, each family, as an opportunity to pay attention a little bit more to some of those details and have them develop a way of helping themselves at the same time as helping their children. The way that I do therapy has evolved over the years and looks different with me in my office than the way a lot of other people do it. I only know mine intimately.
Yeah.
But I have brought in a lot of different experiences I've had in my life into helping people develop their visual skills. I have a lot of experience with the body movements. So I've taken a lot of coursework with MNRI, Svetlana Muskatova's work. I've done a lot of reading with the Feldenkrais method. I am a certified Kripalu yoga instructor. I practice yoga on a regular basis and meditation and breath work. And there's a lot that I bring into a session, even before we get into my work as an optometrist.
I love when we share success stories, because this podcast is about knowledge, absolutely, but it's also about hope and inspiration. And I do believe these success stories that I know that you have are going to help autism moms, parents, educators, whoever's listening with vision therapy.
Success stories are so many. Trying to pick ones that are most relevant. One particular boy I can remember vividly right now is, he was in middle school, 7th, 8th grade, very much struggling with doing the things that his teachers wanted him to do in exactly the same way that they wanted to do them every single time. However, an extremely smart person. And when he came to me, he was seeing double pretty much all of the time. And that double vision was a lot related to the stress within his body. Okay, so he is showing up into my office with clearly what's called an exotropia, the eyes being pointed out. And I really needed to help him figure out at the foundational level how we could deal with all of those stressors that were underlying that difficulty that he was having with his vision. So, I brought in a lot of my different modalities. I start off with the body work. I start off with simple movements that kind of balance the nervous system, and we work from there. And now he is not seeing double. So as he enters high school, he still has some struggles with doing things that other people want him to do in exactly the way that they want them to do. He wants them to be done, but he's not seeing double. He's able to much more thoroughly articulate what's happening because we've given him those tools, and also that recognition of like, what does it feel like when I get stressed? When does my heart rate start to go up? When do my shoulders come high? And that changes how my eyes work. So helping him to see those steps along the way has really helped.
I love that insight, how he can then take control of his own. He has his own tools, his own toolbox to help himself.
Absolutely. People often ask me, does vision therapy work? Am I going to be having to do vision therapy for the rest of my life, with my child? And my approach to vision therapy is that my goal is to teach a person how their visual system works and teach them tools to continuously maintain organization within the visual system. There's nothing that I do to a person in the course of vision therapy. Really what I'm doing is allowing a person to have an experience that gets them more connected with how their eyes and their visual system works. And yes, it can happen for somebody who is nonverbal and not able to articulate what's going on, because we see it in changes in their behavior. We see it in their willingness to look and learn and approach tasks differently once we've given them those tools for organization. A lot of times I get the children who might rock their head back and forth, and there's a lot of times where they are switching back and forth between two images.
Wow.
So in that, they don't necessarily sit for my optometric evaluation in a way that a neurotypical person might, but being able to observe their behavior and through different tasks or games or whatever it is that we bring out in that day, really are able to determine that they are really switching back and forth between two different ways of seeing and searching for something that is meaningful.
Tell us about Meaningful Moves.
So Meaningful Moves is a program of exercises that I have been working on for a number of years. And really what these meaningful moves are exercises that parents can do with their children that really set the foundation for sensory and motor and visual skill development. So it started off where I was teaching movement classes for mothers and babies, and as well as a yoga teacher, as a certified yoga teacher. And it kind of evolved, like I wasn't really able to be just the yoga teacher. I was always the developmental optometrist teaching yoga. So I would bring a lot of lessons, I would say, to my movement classes. And then now, as things have evolved, I really am trying to package these types of movements to be things that parents can learn, regardless of the diagnosis that their child might have, regardless of where their concerns are, that we can provide input and information to our young children that will help the developmental trajectory of things. I've found that a lot of young parents are, again, looking for permission to do things with their children. They're scared to move them. They have to stay safe. They have to stay in the bucket. They have to stay in the car seat. They have to stay in the stroller. We're very scared to do things wrong. We need the permission of the pediatrician, the permission of a professional for what do I need to do at what specific time. So Meaningful Moves is kind of my goal is to help people have a framework of moving with their young children, babies starting, on the day of birth, if they feel comfortable with that, but very early with experiences of sensory and motor exercises to help their development.
In my journey, I was doing all the neuroscience classes that I needed to take, and I started to discover the visual system in a different way. Now, my husband was a behavioral optometrist, so we really had these great discussions about how we learn to see and what is really vision. So I learned that vision is more than eyesight. So eyesight is really just one little skill. So how clearly you see something is a very small skill. And in fact, it's not really that important of a skill. You might go, oh, well, how am I going to read my book if I can't see it clearly? So there are many more skills that are more important, like periphery, understanding where the peripheral space is, and the ability to see and center at the same time as seeing in the periphery, or the ability to change your focus back and forth, but not just like, can I do it, but can I do it quickly and efficiently? Not just can I do it quickly and efficiently, can I do it at the same time I see in the center and the periphery? And can I take what I see visually in the center and the periphery and correspond that to what my ears are hearing in their center and in their periphery? Can I balance and coordinate my body? And can I have a thought about it? So there are many more skills in seeing clearly. There's perceptual skills as well. Visual memory. Can I recall something I just saw later? Visual constancy, form constancy. If there's something that's kind of turned a different direction, can I still recognize what it is because it's upside down, so, or to the side? A lot of different skills. So I decided, well, this is really intriguing to me. After my occupational therapy degree, I started working with my husband in our small practice in Northeast Ohio. Didn't take too long. I think my first two patients, one of them was a special needs case, and they thrived. And I said, okay, this is a big deal. I had a young girl too that was not classified as having any special needs, but she was about 17 years old, and she thought she was dyslexic. She came in thinking that, and we did our therapy, and mind you, that was my first day, so I wasn't that good yet. And here, after 8 weeks of therapy, she ended up passing her exams that she needed for scholarships and got a $20,000 scholarship to Case Western University in Cleveland area. And so that I knew right away. And then you get the child that, maybe on their spectrum, and they've never hugged their mother. Mm-hmm. And now they do. And now they want that affection, right? It just became just a snowball of success after success after success. Parents would tell me all the time, Patti, you're an OT. you do occupational therapy? I say, no, I am an OT. I did get that license, but I practice vision therapy. And they tell me OT helped, PT helped, speech helped, logotherapy helped. You know it all does. These parents out there that are listening and watching today, they know all the incredible things that they did. But parents tell me time and time again, until we change the child's vision, we didn't really make the leaps and bounds. Once we changed the child's vision, we really changed the whole path of their future. When I was young, I could not read. Now, my mother was a special education teacher one day, and I went to school at the same school that my mother taught in. So, of course, if you think about that kind of relationship, I pretty much got away with everything, got passed along the system, even though I couldn't read. I was basically about 19 years old when I really could read. Actually, when I really started my journey in learning how to read. I did do quite well in school, but I can't be so proud of the way I went about learning or getting good grades on tests. I kind of took a peek on other people's papers and did what I had to do to survive and protect my own self-esteem, because that,
Sure.
You're living with challenges and differences. You really do crumble inside and you feel like a very small person. And then how can you succeed and all that? Through time, I did manage to get through high school rather well. And then when I got to college, I was pretty scared because I knew how I got through elementary school. I knew how I got through high school. And here I needed to get through college. So I went to my university at Ohio State, and I would go to every teacher and I would say, can I have more time on tests? I diagnosed myself. I have dyslexia. So the teachers would say, sure, take more time on tests. And I would do really, really well because it took me that long, which now I know I couldn't organize my visions. I couldn't organize my eyes to put two eyes together and see clearly. For me, when I would look at paper, the words would kind of move on the page, like, a little bit. And then they would just kind of cycle right off. And I'd be looking at a white piece of paper. There was no words.
Wow.
Right.
It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it was very hard. And then, of course, when I was real little, I tried to tell my mom that I was struggling. My mom did take me to the optometrist. The optometrist said, oh, she just wants big girl glasses like her sister. She's fine. That optometrist was just looking at maybe the health of my eyes. Yes. But they were just looking at, can I see clearly? And I could see clearly, like most children. Most children can see 20/20. It's not the issue. It's not why our children on the spectrum have problems with their visual system. It's not seeing clearly. Anyways, I became a nanny in college to help pay my way through college. And I was nannying these little girls. They were twin girls, 2 years old. And they asked me to read a book to them. Of course, I could read. So I pull out a book and I start just telling the story myself. I was making it up. And as smart as those little 2-year-olds were, they said, Miss Patti, you don't know how to read, do you? And
what?
I'm like,
really?
I'm 19. And how did these 2-year-olds call me out? Right? If they've been calling me out that fast, have I really been faking everybody else? Right? So the glass walls came down and I said, I'm going to learn to read. So I did go to I had a math teacher that said, no, you can't have more time on tests. Prove it. Prove that you have a disability. You need a label. Now, I personally think labels are for cans, but they do come in handy at times to get services. So I went to the disabilities department and I was diagnosed with dyslexia. And I did get more time on tests and I did graduate summa cum laude. So yeah, I did well. And yeah, it was a hard adventure, but
so inspiring though. Wow, what a story.
Yeah, so I made it through, but that hardship, that struggle really, I think, helps me make these connections.
Yeah.
Now, today I practice vision therapy. I am an OT, but I practice vision therapy. And I use my teaching background and I use my OT background, which has a lot of psychology courses in it, a lot of sensory information. But where I got my real understanding about how the visual system develops is through behavioral optometry. So
yes. Yeah. And I know that if our listeners are going, oh my gosh, okay, can you tell us more about what that is?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you about this because it is foundational. It really brings all these different therapies that parents are in, and it just brings them right into how vision should be leading, the leading sense. So out of all of our neurology, vision is about 80% of our sensory pathways. It's connected to 80%. And it's the one thing that very few parents even know, that they can go to a specialist that understands their child's vision. Arnold Gesell was a psychologist a long time ago. He said, to understand a child, you have to understand the child's vision. And of course, to understand the child's vision, you really need to understand the child. And along the time that Arnold Gesell lived, there was another man. His name was Dr. A.M. Skeffington, and he was a behavioral optometrist. Now, Dr. A.M. Skeffington, I told this story, he came up with a Venn diagram, which is really 4 circles kind of connected, all overlapping. So there's one kind of right in the middle of those 4 circles that all unite. The bottom circle for him was anti-gravity. And this is the baby coming out of the womb, lifting their head. And think about that. When you're a baby on the floor and you lift your head up only a few inches, what happens to your focusing system? When you learn to lift your head up further, you can see in the distance what changes in your focusing system. Mm-hmm. When you eventually learn the motor pattern of crawling on your belly, you're reaching out in space, right? And you're pulling with these fingers. And what are you doing? You're reaching for a goal in life. Maybe it's a bottle, maybe it's a mom or a dad or a friend, but you're reaching and pulling it into your life, right? But a good commando crawl, good belly crawl, you're also pushing with your legs. And you're pushing through those hard times, right? Mm-hmm. So what your eyes are doing is your eyes are darting back and forth, right? And we learn to organize ourselves on our belly. We learn to push up on our hands and knees. We learn to crawl. Creep actually is what we call it. Eventually pull to stand, eventually walk. All the time, we've integrated our auditory system with the sounds, localized, turn our head here, turn our head there. We developed our neck muscles to hold our head still so that we don't have a head tilt. And we've learned to use our bottom of our body at the same time we're using our top, so we don't just have to use one part of our body, and the left and the right. We've learned to integrate the tactile system. We've learned about any gut issues, because if there's a baby that's colicky or doesn't like to be on the tummy, number one thing, always go to the gut, right? So we've kind of working on that. When we rock back and forth on our hands and knees as a baby, we're changing our focus in and out, zooming like a camera lens. So all of those primitive movement patterns are really important. I created a tower to talk about primitive reflexes. So this is my little tower demonstration. There's different reflexes that come in at a specific time in life. This one says fear paralysis, comes in at 5 weeks gestation approximately, should be matured by about 9 to 12 weeks, so that the more reflex can come in, and that's our fight or flight. But a lot of kids on the spectrum, they're stuck down here in fear paralysis. I'm not going out, I'm not doing that, or don't touch me, right? Mm-hmm. Or this fight or flight, they get very angry and they have outbursts, and right, they're stuck right here in this very primitive part of our brain. Well, life still goes, we still grow, we still have all these, but what happens is if we have some of these reflexes that are not well mature, everything else still gets built. All the skills that we still need to learn, but they're compromised, and some to a very great extent, and the nervous system becomes very disorganized. So I like to say I'm a clue finder. Families are my clue givers. I find the clues, I do testing, and then I find the reflex, and I put it through reflex movement patterns and specific with, here's my secret. This is what's different. There's a lot of great programs out there. So if parents are doing them, wonderful. But this is my secret. Vision being 80% of your sensory pathways, it has to be, you have to program the nervous system to make vision leading. If you don't have a behavioral optometrist that can really help with that organization of the visual system while you're doing a reflex program, it's not going to work as well. You're still going to have a dysregulated person. They're still not going to be well integrated, because those ears, those eyes, and the body have to be neurologically wired together. If we do different therapies and wire things apart, we're apart. But we want to set the stage for these neurons to discover each other so that we can be wired together. So that's what I do. And then I talked about the anti-gravity. There's also centering the eyes. That's learning how to move the eyes different directions, in, out, up, down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's focusing. And then there's this other powerful bottom circle on the right side is our speech and language auditory system. The better we can communicate what we see, however we can, right? However we can get that out and express that, the better we're actually seeing, more vision. And that is mind, that is perception, that's brain. The eyes are actually an outgrowth of brain tissue. Your eyes are part of your brain. So the more brain development you get. So we tie all of those things together in our very special vision therapy program that we do. So when you guide vision and you really tap in, and there are some really great, phenomenal doctors out there that like to team with other practitioners and can really provide that support. But when you make vision leading, everything else just really explodes. And so our big referrals are obviously parents, right? Because they see that change. OT, PT, speech and language, they're all referring. Pediatricians, which you would think never would because they're very medical minded. I've got a lot of pediatricians that bring their own children. And once they really get what we do, pediatricians are now, okay. We used to, pediatricians actually, it's still a very common thing when a parent brings a baby to the pediatrician. I had a case actually early today, 17-year-old boy comes in and he just got his diagnosis of autism in the last 4 years. So they diagnosed him as attention deficit problem. And the mom said, I kept trying to tell the doctors, like, he's not crawling normally. He's not engaging with the world the same way. Oh, he's got attention issues, which, okay, he did. But he had more deep issues. And mom was really kind of disappointed. She couldn't relate to different organizations. I asked her if she knew TACA, and she didn't know. So I'm putting her in touch with TACA. But she doesn't have any of the support system because she was misdiagnosed. Because pediatricians think, oh, it's fine. They'll all develop their own way. And no, listen to mom or dad, grandmother, because they have that knowing. Remember, our children are really an extension of our own self.
Yes.
We know our kids, and it's hard when we feel our kids disconnected, but you're still connected, right? Like
yes.
You're supposed to have a two-way street with your children, right? And it comes and goes. But with a child on the spectrum, you can be projecting out, but you don't necessarily feel that back at you, right? Or little glimpses here and there, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and sometimes pediatricians just don't listen to those that know the most. And
it's still true. I mean, even that connection. When I coach moms, I'm constantly saying, let's go to your heart space. Like, you're the expert. You're the expert as the mom. Yes.
You are. And so I hope that there are pediatricians out there listening, because again, I find I am only a clue finder. I organize clues. I look at what the clues are. Basically, I think of a puzzle getting dumped out, and I look just like I would put a puzzle together. I look, this piece has this clue, and okay, where does it fit and when does it fit to this puzzle? We can have the right piece at the wrong time, right? The right intervention, but not quite right now. Doesn't mean it's a bad intervention. Even if you did it before, it might not have worked before, but now it does. Now it fits in your puzzle. But if we could get pediatricians to really understand that the parents have a knowing, they are the experts. But if parents are interested in learning more about vision therapy and how it can help individuals that are diagnosed with autism or somewhere on the spectrum, you might want to check out this book. It's by Melvin Kaplan. That's Melvin, and Kaplan, Kaplan. He's the author of 2 books. His first one was Seeing Through New Eyes, which talked about our tools of prisms and lenses. And then he wrote in 2015, he wrote a new book called The Secrets in Their Eyes, Transforming the Lives of People with Cognitive, Emotional, Learning, or Movement Disorders, or autism by changing the visual software of the brain. And so that's a really great book for you to look at. And there's another one I wanted to share with you. This is by a person who's no longer with us in our field of behavioral optometry, but what a great man this person was. And he really did do a lot to make us really think outside the box of how vision develops. And his name was Dr. Harry Wax. So he was a behavioral optometrist, and before he passed, he was part of writing a book called Visual Spatial Portals to Thinking, Feeling, and Movement, Advancing Competencies and Emotional Development in Children with Learning and Autism Spectrum Disorders. So there's two books that I think every family should look up. Now, there are some other things that are helpful. I've written a book called Indicators of Primitive and Postural Reflexes. It's an assessment tool. It's called the IPRA, and it is currently on a pre-sale, but some of your listeners will listen to this much later. It should be out by the end of December. And that really is a great assessment tool for helping families test for reflexes. So what I tried to do is create a standardized tool that anybody can look at, learn how to give a test to know whether reflexes are matured or how much more mature are they this time than the last time, regardless of what program you've put them in. Because sure, I'm always going to say that vision is the best, right? That's my passion. I believe it to my core, that the eyes are the window into the soul. Right. And
Yes.
so for me, vision is the place. You start with the gut and you go to vision. That's how I think. But of course, there are a lot of other great programs out there, and maybe they also mature the nervous system, right?
Yes.
You yourself know that you've taken your son to many great therapists and doctors through the years. So even a parent could read through this, learn how to test, and then just, test and see, are there changes in how their children are functioning, how you're even adults, because all of us have some immaturity in our nervous system. We have our own personal quirks. So I love this because it's a first book out there that's got, I put in little video clips. Okay, so real testing. So somebody can go and watch a video and see how to test and see, am I doing it like that? Of course, everybody's going to respond a little differently, but I also put a list of possible abnormal responses, because when you're first trying something, you don't know what's normal. Is that good? Is that, I don't know. Maybe that's what you're supposed to do, right? So I created lists of, there's always something I haven't thought of, right? That's not in the list, but a good number of things that are abnormal to look for. So it gives parents and practitioners that are just starting on their adventure, or doctors, I hope families purchase the book and give a gift to their eye doctors. And by the way, I'm not making money on that book. I should have said that in the beginning. That is going to the OEPF Foundation, where you can buy the book if you wanted to do it. So I'm not soliciting my book. There are other books out there that are great. So,
yeah. Well, I think it's perfectly fine to solicit your book because it's needed.
So there is another book now this one's really pricey, but it is also just released. It's Applied Concepts in Vision Therapy 2.0. It's meant for the eye doctor, but there's a lot of information in here about how visual skills develop. And if somebody is seeing a eye doctor, but they don't have a vision therapist or a vision therapy eye doctor on staff, maybe the eye doctor could purchase this book. I do have a very extensive chapter in that book about primitive reflexes and how each primitive reflex actually, I say, is like a seed that grows up to a visual skill. So they all have a vision outcome, every one of our primitive reflexes. And so maybe if families could clue their eye doctors into that book, Applied Concepts in Vision Therapy 2.0, maybe those eye doctors can learn a little bit more too about all this. You could go to the College of Optometrists in Vision Development, that's covd.org, and they have a Locate a Doctor on theirs. And another one you can go to is oepf.org, and that's actually where you probably would find that book, the IPRA, by going to oepf.org. And that website will also have a Locate a Doctor. Now, sometimes there's very few, far between, and this is a very large nation, and this is also international. So if you have listeners from around the world, you can go to those two websites and you can find a practitioner in your country or in your locale. So they are all around the world, and you can find help. So do that. But if they're very far away from you, like 2, 3, 4 hours, I'm going to say do it anyways. It can really open up your eyes, and just getting the evaluation, because again, if we remember what Arnold Gissell said, to understand the child's vision, you have to understand the child, and understand the child, you have to understand the child's vision. If we don't understand the child's vision, we really don't have a good grasp of what that individual is dealing with, and how hard they are working just to get through a day or a session or a 5-minute period, right? Sometimes it's just so overwhelming. So
Yeah.
I would recommend you make the flight, make the drive, do it anyways, get the assessment. If anybody is looking on those websites, I would look for somebody that has an FCOVD after their name. F as in Frank, because that tells you that they are a fellow of the College of Optometry and Vision Development, which means that they've gone that extra mile to get more information and how to work with individuals with special needs, whether they have any kind of disorder on the spectrum or any other delay or brain injury or whatever learning difference that they may have. Those doctors have gone that extra mile to become a fellow. So it wasn't easy. Another place that families could look, especially if there is a brain injury component, is the NORA, Neuro-Optometric Rehabilitation Association. So that's NORA, and I believe it's .com, but you'll have to check that. Put in NORA and then always put in vision, and you'll get the right place. But they also have a located doctor, and those practitioners are holistic in the sense that they're not just eye doctors. That group is all kinds of therapists that work together for the goal of improving visual outcomes. I just really want to say again, thank you for the opportunity. I really do love sharing my passion. And this is such a life-changing thing when you address the visual system. And when you address the visual system with the whole componentry, from the primitive reflexes to the speech and language and the auditory, but you really make the visual system the guide of all that. It guides our posture, it guides our emotions, it guides our thoughts. And if we can change vision, we really do have a brighter future. So